Superficial front line. The superficial front line starts from the base of the toes and follows its way up to the knee and goes all the way to the pubis. It starts again in a secondary line that starts from the pubis and runs all the way up to the base of the skull. The superficial front line is involved in curling the body into flexion and as protective mechanisms. Okay, so as you can see in the picture, the superficial front line does run along the whole anterior side of the body for the most part. It does assist in flexion of the trunk and hips, so this kind of movement. It is composed of fast twitch muscle fibers for the most part, so it is more of a movement-based line. It does provide some postural qualities as well, and then it also just counteracts the superficial back line that runs along the whole backside of your body. So just to keep you upright, because if you didn't have it, then your body would be curled into flexion, right? So they're just kind of counteracting each other at all times. It does also assist in dorsiflexion of the foot. So when your foot is up like this would be plantar flex, dorsiflex like that, and then also extension of the knee. So if your knee's like this, it's coming out. Good. So a way to stretch this line, just move this down, would be if you got into this kind of a position. Okay, so you're stretching the whole anterior side of your body, and then you're also bringing your head up because it also attaches to the sternocleidomastoid. So to really stretch this line, you're going to want to put your head into it as well. And then also, if you notice, my feet are plantar flexed. So it's the opposite of the action of this line to really get that full stretch. Okay, so with the superficial back line, it runs in two separate lines on both of the legs to start. It starts on the plantar fascia of the short toe flexors, runs up to the gastrocnemius and the Achilles tendon, keeps following up to the hamstrings and then the sacrotuberous ligament. It keeps continuing up to the sacrolumbar fascia and the erector spinae, and then it also continues up through the back and runs up to the head, following it all around, and it actually attaches on the anterior surface by the eyebrows. Okay, so as you can see, the superficial back line does run along the whole posterior side of your body. It is composed of mostly slow twitch muscle fibers, which is the opposite of the superficial front line. So its job is to assist in extension. That could be like hip extension, arm extension, like any of these movements basically. So basically a way to stretch this is going into what most people consider as the downward dog. So that would just be your feet up like this. And then if you can see, since it does attach on the eyebrows on the anterior surface, you're going to want to really tuck your head in to really get that stretch. So the next is the spiral line, which winds through the three cardinal lines. It loops around the trunk in the helix with another loop in the leg from hip to arch and back again. It joins one side of the skull across the midline of the back to the opposite shoulder, and then across the front of the torso to the same side hip, knee, and foot, arching, returning back up to the body of the head. So the muscles involved in the spiral line are the biceps femoris, fibularis longus, tibialis anterior, IT band, tensor fasciae latae, external and internal obliques, serratus anterior, and the major and minor rhomboids. So the spiral line interacts with a lot of the other lines that occur in your body. It wraps around and basically creates balance within all planes. It not only creates, but it also mediates rotation. So one way to stretch this line is to get on the floor, and then you're actually going to take your leg and move it to the side of you here. Get over so I have enough room. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take your arm and spiral it in crosswards rotations, and you'll feel a nice stretch throughout this whole entire line. So the lateral line runs roughly between the lateral malleolus and the front head of the fibula. It continues up superiorly to the anterior ligament of the head of the fibula. It goes through the iliotibial tract, the abductor muscles, the TFL, glute max, lateral abdominal obliques, then through the external and internal intercostals, up through the sternocleidomastoid, and it ends on the occipital ridge / the mastoid process. So one thing with the lateral line is it does go on either side of your body like this. So just like how the superficial front line and the superficial back line counteracted each other to maintain balance, the two sides of the lateral lines do the same thing. So the one thing that I really wanted to point out based on the landmarks of the lateral line, since the lateral line starts on the medial side of your foot and actually like wraps underneath and then comes up like this. So if this muscle gets tight, it can cause excess eversion into your foot like this. So that's one postural deformity to make note of. If a person has excess eversion of the foot, that it possibly could be a tight lateral line. So the lateral lines, based on their tracking points, they do promote like side bending movements kind of thing. One way to best stretch the lateral line if it's tight is to cross your legs like so, and then with taking your hand like this, try and push out your hips and really stretch that line. If you had something to hold on to with this hand, or like a TRX or something, you could also create an additional line of pull and like hold on to it here and really like stretch against it. So the lateral lines, based on their tracking points, they do promote like side bending movements kind of thing. One way to best stretch the lateral line if it's tight is to cross your legs like so, and then with taking your hand like this, try and push out your hips and really stretch that line. If you had something to hold on to with this hand, or like a TRX or something, you could also create an additional line of pull and like hold on to it here and really like stretch against it. So the front functional line starts at the linear aspera of the femur. It comes up through the adductor longus, through the pubic tubercle and symphysis, through the lateral sheath of the rectus abdominis, and then attaches through the fifth rib and the sixth rib cartilage. It goes through the lower edge of the pectoralis major, and then it ends on the shaft of the humerus. Now the back functional line starts at the tuberosity of the tibia. It goes through the subpatellar tendon, the patella, vastus lateralis, through the shaft of the femur, up to the gluteus maximus, to the sacrum, then through the sacral fascia, up through the lumbar dorsal fascia, and then up to the latissimus dorsi, and then ends at the shaft of the humerus. So the front and back functional line, they're really interesting because they do oppose each other. These two lines, they are used more for movement in opposed to some of the other lines that were more postural based. So they do oppose one another, and they are used for power and precision. So they are athletic kind of movements. What's really interesting about the front and back functional line is that like your glute and your latissimus dorsi, based on the insertion points, they are actually connected to each other. So the opposite glute and the opposite lat on either side are connected to each other. So it's really interesting in movements such as, say, like the baseball throw. So you're throwing with this end and you're starting with this leg forward. So you actually generate power through this glute to be able to swing with this hand. So based on where the insertion points are of this myofascial line, they actually generate power with each other.